Hey Rick, welcome to Utah Valley University. We just saw a screening of your film. Let me tell guys, how'd you feel about it? Give them a round of applause. Oh, there they are. And we got a bunch of students here lined up to ask questions. And let me tell you, this is just such a great, beautiful film. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And they're going to just come up. We're just going to do it like this. It's much easier for you to have to try to kind of see people through the Zoom. I'm going to start with a question, and I don't want to take too much time away from people here because I know a lot of people will have questions to ask. Um, but uh, you co-wrote this. I want to talk about the screenplay a little bit and the writing process because you co-wrote with Dustin Guy Defa, who's a Utah guy, and
Yeah.
who we've had here at the same forum, like last year, I think we showed person to person, and
Okay.
I've seen several of your films, and I've seen several of his films. And while this film is like your other films, and like his films, is different than both, really. And I just wondered, kind of about that collaboration, and just if you could kind of talk a little bit about that experience with co-writing with him.
Well, I've I've co-written several films with a couple other writers, and those writers have never interacted. So like Colm O'Leary is an old, he was in my first two films, and we collaborated writing on a few things. And Dustin I met in New York, and um, he was actually in my last film, Entertainment, as an actor, and he's also in this one. He's on stage with there's like a sort of
Choir thing.
choir, yeah, or
Yeah.
uh, and he's acting in that. So, and he's a remarkable actor, and um, just as yeah, and so he has a different sort of I'm a sort of a contrarian, kind of confrontational kind of thinker about cinema, and he is sort of I think he loves movies more than I love movies, and so it's nice to be able to have a push and pull and sort of in that process, and I think this movie, in some ways, it's much more of an art film than any of my other movies, and at the same time, it also flirts a little bit with certain elements of conventional narrative.
Yeah.
So he was a good foil for my more kind of problematic instincts. So.
Well, great. I'm going to turn it over to them. They're going to come down. They're going to say their name and just kind of where you are in school or whatever. And I know it's late. We're on the East Coast, so if you ever just start to get too tired, then just let us know. We appreciate your
Okay.
time. Thank you so much, Rick.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, Rick. My name is Lucas, and just wanted to
Hey,
say an amazing film.
hey,
And yeah, very emotionally heavy. And the first thing that really caught my eye when I watched it was the aspect ratio. And I remember the last time that I saw an aspect ratio like that was I think it was Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I was just wondering, like, were you part of the decision maker for this aspect ratio, and why did you choose to have that?
yeah. I mean, it's sort of an era specific aspect ratio. It was it's the Academy ratio, and was uh, used in a lot of television. It's sort of it's there's a like a really beautiful kind of like artificial nature to it in this day and age where we're used to seeing 16:9 or
Yeah.
I mean, in my previous film, Entertainment, we shot with the anamorphic 50s anamorphic lenses. So it's like an uncropped anamorphic, and that's like really speaks cinema, I mean, even today, I mean, whether it's Interstellar or whatever, you get the, this sort of this band, and I was just really curious and I liked it. And there's it's popular for this. I mean, Andrea Arnold uses it a lot and folks in the contemporary sense, but for this movie, how sort of staged it is, and almost like the wax museum kind of quality of all of these still marginally still tableaus and stuff, like having these two bands there, these two, I love the idea that an audience would sort of like be aware of the aspect ratio, that
Mhm.
it would sort of like creep in and their eye wanders and says, wow, it's this square ratio, and these especially if the curtains don't come and join it, which they don't in most theaters, and certainly not on our laptops or our televisions. So you have these two big black bars on the side, and I kind of love that because I want the viewer to be aware of, occasionally aware that they're watching a film, and
Mhm.
then to be taken in, and but I'm interested in the viewer, the audience's eye straying and their mind wandering, I mean, my mind wanders all the time, and especially when I was in school. So I think there's something to be, not just, it isn't, I don't think we need to be scolded for that. I think it's sort of like, it can be playful in a way, and that our curiosity can, tell us things, so I like that the viewer would feel kind of constrained and, be aware of the material of the thing. So,
Yeah, that was a really good choice. So thank you so much for answering the question.
sure, thank you.
Yeah, have a
Yeah,
good night.
you too.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm
Hey,
third
Ben.
year in the production track, and I had other questions that I wanted to ask to begin with, but the one that came to mind while watching this was I've every now and then I see a big name actor in a lower budget production,
Yeah.
and this one it was Jeff Goldblum, and it was just I'm probably not the only one who was surprised to see his face come up, but I was curious what it was like, what the process was like to get someone that big and how
Yeah.
that was possible.
Well, ever since I started making movies, I've had to kind of, unfortunately, in the United States, the actor is the commodity, and it's the draw and for financing and this sort of thing, and so, uh, less so in a lot of other countries that the arts are subsidized by the government, but since this is an open market thing, the financiers say, where's the name, where's the star? And and well, I've always had to move into that space. Rather, initially, I just wanted to work with non-actors, people who were unprofessional actors, because it was something I was interested in, like the sort of neo-realist kind of approach. But um, then you begin to work with actors and you get access to them. But I could never go straight at it. I always had to go around and think like, you know, who would be open to this sort of thing, and why would they be open to that? And thinking sort of around the thing, I've managed to find people that have been really great partners, and Jeff's certainly one of those, and he was just, incredibly curious, and he doesn't get, I don't know that in recent times, he hasn't had a lot of like dramatic roles like this, especially in this sort of this kind of like, context, this hyper formal kind of context or something. So, uh, yeah, he was just a joy, and he responded to it, and but it's yeah, yeah, he's a wonderful, curious, uh, 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 you know, actor. So. Um, and incredibly uh, adept at what he does. So, uh,
Awesome.
uh,
Thank you.
answer your question, sort of.
Yeah, we got there. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name's Tucker. I graduated this semester from the directing track. Really loved the film. My question was kind of regarding, I know you did a lot of research into the historicity of this specific like time period and the actual like healthcare professionals that were doing these procedures and lobotomies. Like, how did you differentiate? Like, what was your, I don't know, kind of decision-making matrix on like what you knew would play narratively, like in a film? Like, how did you know what pieces to choose to pick up to put into the screenplay and then put on screen?
Well, I sort of go about that kind of thing. I'm very distrustful of narrative, and I'm not I'm interested in the commercial market, but not in I'm interested in the viewer being sort of like challenged in a particular kind of way and asking certain questions. It's my only motivation for making films. So it isn't entirely like I just want the viewer to be swept up in the thing and taken and they laugh, they cry, they go home and forget about the film. I like that the film could sort of offer problems and contentions the whole way through. So it's sort of a bit of a cat and mouse game. So I look at Walter Friedman's life, which this was based on, and we essentially just sort of like, extracted kind of like some events and arcs from his life, and they were fictionalized. And it's not directly based on him, but it riffs on certain sort of tendencies and particularly in that era and that kind of thing. But so as far as taking the history and making, I'm playing with movies. So a lot of it is sort of like what typically would be extracted for the satisfaction of the audience just on the amusement park ride of a movie. And but then, me being obstinate, I say, okay, we have that. Now, how can we sort of distort that? How can we make that sort of interesting and problematic and dysfunctional sort of. So um, yeah, yeah. I mean, history is a narrative. It's many different narratives. And so as many different narratives, I mean, in film is the same way. I mean, none of it's it's both true and completely fictional, whether it's memory or history or a screenplay. And so, I mean, it plays in that space, I suppose.
Sweet. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers.
How's it going? I'm Hondo. I graduate next semester. I had another question about actors. Um, can you give insight on how you um, coach actors to kind of perform within like a specific style? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, picking up with what I was just saying, I mean, my sort of approach is a little, uh, it differs a little bit from a consumer kind of cinema approach insofar as that I want to create these sort of problems for the audience, and some of those problems are in the performances. Like Ty, I wanted him to be this negative center of the film, where almost just like this blank slate that the he's the avatar for the audience, and but we don't really know him. We can't quite figure him out. He doesn't. So that sort of thing. And as far as like working with Ty to get to that. Uh, we talked a lot about everybody. We talked a lot about cinema and my problem with consumer commercial cinema and their interest in my approach. And so you talk a lot about these foundational things, and then it's a lot of fun after that if everybody's on the same page. Um, uh, but you work with different actors differently, but and every director works with actors differently, which is something that I never really was told all that much. I spent a lot of time thinking that, oh, I need to conform to certain, like, how do you be a director? How do you work with actors? Well, you work with actors, sort of in a idiosyncratic, intuitive kind of way. You need to bring part of yourself. You need to be honest and that sort of stuff. And you're going to find people who want to work with you and people who don't. So,
Cool.
yeah,
Thanks, Rick.
sure.
Hi, I'm Gabe. I'm planning on going to the directing or writing track. And yeah, I was just kind of curious of when this film was in like the pre-production phase and you're like getting into it, like, do you have like a sort of like experience or sort of emotion that you were wanting to convey to the audience when you were first conceiving this?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, sort of like I was saying, I want the audience to, I'm interested in the, the movies that changed my life were movies that made me very confused, and not intellectually confused, but like stepping out, being like, what am I watching, and challenged me to think about the world around me and cinema in a different way, and there's a lot of like conforming to particular arcs and three-act structure and certain narrative, delivery devices in American cinema. And so, I with this movie, it set out to sort of, hopefully challenge a few of those things and play with the audience a little bit. And so, the whole thing is it's sort of hopefully challenging the way that we consume narrative and making us a little self-conscious and self-reflective and stuff. So, all of my choices are about that, and it's playful too. I mean, it's playful for me, and it also was about hyper-formalism, being aware that it's a film, being aware that it's a representation, that it's unreal, but not that's a threshold thing. It's delicate, so that all went into it. I think about that sort of stuff. I'm almost less interested in just, in story than I am in these approaches and using story to facilitate these approaches.
Okay,
So
thank you.
sure, yeah.
Hi, I'm Joel. I'm in the post-production track. I'm in my third year, but I noticed, I don't know how involved you were in the post-production side of it, but I noticed there were a lot of times in the film where it would hold on shots for a long, long time. And I wanted to know if you were involved in those kind of decisions, what the decision-making process was for determining how long to hold on those kind of shots.
Oh, yeah, you mean in the edit?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I co-edited this in the previous two films. So I had a co-editor that came in, and I sat back, and he put together the assembly, and we kicked back and forth, but I was always present during the edit, and then I took the film and I was just alone with it. And um, but yeah, I love the idea. I mean, editing it can be really difficult because it's so transformative. I mean, the film you can take a disaster in production and turn it into something that is profound in the edit. This whole thing about, people, it's become a cliche, oh, fix it in the edit or something like that's bad. I actually don't think that's bad. You really can fix it in the edit. It's not going to be the film you wanted it to be, but none of this should. We should always just be listening to the thing and what does it want to do? What does it want to do? And but then it's, you obviously have some agency in it. I like going, frames beyond what the cut. Like there's a place that you're just sort of like, bam, that's where he cuts. This is what, that's the beat. I like going just beyond that. I like that it's sort of feeling a little off. So because I think it makes the audience sort of restless, and when the audience you don't want them to be too restless, otherwise they're gone. But if they're just a little restless, they're a little agitated, they're curious, and they might be a little frustrated, but they're also curious. And they're wrestling with the film a little bit, so it's delicate. But that's why we hold past the welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Rick. I'm Preston. I'm a cinematography student here. The thing that kind of hit me the most was the tone that you'd set kind of throughout. So, like your editing, I saw, as a credit, you were on the editing. The jarring, like, kind of out of nowhere edit can flow right into something super subtle, like, a wide into just a little more medium. And that, kind of powered your tone that you'd set with your score and the drone that you kind of had. I guess the main question I had is your, camera placement and working with your cinematographer, who's like primarily a documentarian, right? So
Yeah,
how
not
you,
my previous movie, but yeah, he's his yeah, primarily he shot documentaries. Yeah.
so how, working with him, how you kind of use the cinematography and your, methodical stuff to create this tone that you carried through.
Yeah, so his name's Lorenzo Hagerman, and he did a movie called Heli by Amat Escalante. That was he's Amat and Lorenzo are Mexican, and there was a certain sort of I grew up primarily on like European cinema, I mean after all of my Who's the Bosses and the television life that I had, so there's like a kind of there's a formalism that's just a little more native to certain sort of like European cinema oriented directors, and there's a whether it's Carlos Regatas or these there's in Latin America there's a lot of that sort of that European formalism that's it seems really accessible, and basically I loved the how uh, sort of we just tried for something that had a bit of unreality to it, but at the same time, we got this. We had very limited means, and so we couldn't do a lot of coverage. And so I had to think very quickly about what the grammar of the thing was going to be, and I decided on this essentially just sort of shot and reverse shot. So most of the scenes are just two folds, a perspective and then a reverse perspective, and that sort of became like kind of the language of the thing, these so it's and sort of yeah, it was something that developed, and that's the way I sort of I like it. I like that the film tells you how it wants to be shot.
Yeah.
You go in with certain preconceptions, but independent cinema, I mean, it's what it has to offer is that it can be reactive and reflexive. It doesn't have to just be a blueprint that you take through and you use $200 million to dish out something on the other side. It's like we can be light on our feet. We can listen to the medium and listen to what it wants, what it wants, and it's a conversation with the thing, and you adapt, and it's sort of, it's really, that's the value of independent cinema. So, it's a discovery to some degree.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was beautifully said. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jack. I'm in the cinematography track here, and my question was, what was the biggest challenge that you ran into in the making of this film, and how did you deal with it?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's you know, these productions, they come few and far between, and they're both the most uh joyous adrenaline rush and the most anxiety ridden nightmare of your life, and so it's this was very difficult to finance, um and Eddie Moretti and a few folks at Vice were brave enough to take it on. But I mean, in the production, I mean, it was a, it being a period piece and us doing it for real was just incredibly uh, laborious and tough on the whole crew, and everybody was dedicated to it. But it was a big ask. I mean, we did a lot for a bit of a little. So yeah, and like I said, just time and schedule. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot from every film I make. I mean, this was sort of overwritten to some degree because, I like spaces and silences and sort of generating awkwardness in the performances and but that takes time and so we had to cut a lot. We had to cut a lot. I cut so much from this film, and those decisions you sort of have to make on your toes, and so it can be difficult, but I think it's difficult in pretty much every production like that. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
sure.
Hi, my name is Sam. This is my first film class ever, so interesting. I was wondering, I noticed there was just a lot of like, given it's a period piece, 1950s props, locations, set design, old electronics. I was wondering what the process for acquiring and maybe even maintaining and restoring those old props and automobiles looked like.
Well, it's just sort of you get folks who are meticulous about that kind of thing. Your production designer and your prop master and these folks. I mean, uh, um, it's all hands on deck. I mean, this was, while these productions aren't big, at any given time, I mean, it would be considered by Hollywood standards a small production, but there's 50 people working in order to pull it off, or more than that at times, 60 people. So yeah, and there's a lot of sort of in pre-production and there's a lot of conversation about the look of the film and the approach and this kind of thing. I didn't want a Mad Men style sort of on the nose 50s. I wanted something that was, there's a lot of latent stuff. Like there's articles from the 20s and the 30s and a lot of the clothes are from the 40s, and as is the case, you walk around today and I can't differentiate a lot of typical fashion on the street from 1995, I mean, yeah, there's an approach and then a lot of considerations and yeah.
What about the like mental hospitals? What did you do for that? Did you have to find actual like
That
old
was
asylums?
incredibly difficult. Yeah, because we were looking for these Kirkbride hospitals,
Mhm.
which they don't exist anymore. There's one that had been turned into a hotel in Buffalo, and but the majority of them were demolished or are in a state of profound disrepair.
Yeah.
And I mean, these are incredible uh, uh, early Victorian architecture, and initially like very like sort of progressive leaning, like forward thinking architecture for light and space and this kind of thing. But by mid-century, after the war, they were uh, just crowded, and they just had a taboo, so everybody let them fall down and or demolished them or didn't want to get anywhere near them. They had the same taboo that like sanatoriums had, and tubercular sort of clinics and stuff. It was like, you're going to catch mental illness if you repurpose these places. So there was really difficult to find the right architecture with these really wide halls and stuff. The closest we could come is like high schools of like the early century. So we
Really
used a lot of old high schools. Um,
interesting.
but I mean, I sort of experienced my high school as kind of a mental institution of
Well, who
the
doesn't?
problematic sort. So, I thought it was
That felt appropriate.
apt.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Lola. I'm either doing cinematography or directing. One thing that I noticed throughout the film, and I might be completely off base, was there were a lot of plantings of corners, door frames, and windows that all culminated in Andy's lobotomy. So I was wondering if you did that in writing, shot list or just on location? It just kind of all came together.
There was, yeah, it gradually sort of like there's a sort of a rigid geometric kind of thing. There's a lot of, yeah, the corners and how they form, yeah, it's sort of, it kind of develops. It's sort of, it's difficult to, it's not entirely rational, but it definitely develops as a kind of language of the thing, Um, uh, I do think about architecture and spaces a lot. I have a lot of rules and that people might not realize watching the thing. Like in this movie and in my previous movie, I don't let people like leave some like deep extras can leave the frame or the frame, but the primary characters can't leave the frame. I don't let them walk out of the frame. I don't want the audience to think that we can move everywhere. I want it to feel sort of like that the character's sort of trapped in this preconceived notion of this artificial space. But I do allow characters to leave through doors because we can't see them go out of the frame and stuff. So I'm constantly thinking about doors and depth and these sort of things. And so, yeah.
Where was that lobotomy location? Because I feel like I just kept noticing it and I was like so focused on it. And then lobotomy happened and he was between those two corners, the window, the door frame. It was a very interesting space.
That was that was actually at an outbuilding of an old convent in upstate New York. Yeah, we moved from town to town to town in upstate New York, and then we moved the whole production to the Pacific Northwest and yeah. So,
all right, cool. Thank you.
all right. Cheers.
We have one more question for you, Rick. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah.
Unless somebody else really needs them.
Hello, my name is Lucas. I'm a second year student. I plan to go into directing or writing. And you talked about how you don't really like to just completely sweep people up into the film, and you'd rather kind of make them ask questions or leave them with things after the film. And you use a lot of silences and looks and stuff like that in the film. And I was just wondering, how did you decide to put those where they were, or how much kind of leeway did you give the actors to take that how they wanted, if that makes sense?
Yeah. In that sort of thing, it's kind of a joke between me and Ty and Hannah and Jeff. It's like I didn't give them a lot of leeway.
Yeah.
Some of the direction is kind of like now you're going to look over there and then you're going to look back, or you're going to move a quarter inch to your left. I mean, yeah, yeah. I don't really like being told we're told so much in films, you know what I mean? Like films, a lot of commercial cinema just tells us everything, and we get all the information, and whether it's through exposition or through something that's really evident and certain, and we walk away just completely, just too satisfied, and I don't know. That really worries me, and it sort of it concerns me because the world isn't like that. We don't have that experience in our daily lives. It's like we walk around in a constant state of like lostness and uncertainty and just awe, and hopefully curiosity. But things aren't sort of clear to us,
Yeah.
out in the world. It doesn't just offer explanations all of the time, and so I think that I'm interested in the film sort of playing at a conventional narrative as though it's going to deliver something, but then withholding. So it's just it's constant strategic withholding, so that the audience hopefully leans in and becomes just agitated enough to be conscious, and active as a viewer rather than just a passive spectator that's being told stuffed full of crap.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Rick, thank you so much for your time and staying up late with us. I do want to ask just the last question.
Yeah.
for these guys is they're all a bunch of aspiring young students. What sort of advice do you have for aspiring young filmmakers to you know, enter this crazy world and make movies?
Well, I mean, my advice would be to ask yourself, you know, why am I interested in making movies? You know, and what do movies do? And uh, there's a tendency to just sort of like for the drive to create content and sort of flood the field. But you know, it's less about it's you know that's why I don't romanticize movies too much because they can be just as much of a problem as they can be a solution. So I think I'd love to see you know a wave of American films that are really challenging the status quo of the way that both stories are told and you know question stories themselves you know because cinema is an oral and visual language. It isn't you know my big hero of mine is Robert Bresson, you know, and at the time Bresson was doing things that completely made the audience question, you know, like what is this? This isn't theater. It's not operating right, you know, the it's not operating by the rules of literature solely, you know. And I think that you know I just love to see that sort of embrace, and you do see it in some ways, you know. But and to embrace the bounty of cinema as like like problems. You walk into a fine art museum and you look at a painting and it doesn't make any sense to you and it changes your life, you know. It forces you to consider it, you know, rather than just be something that's you know just easily consumed, you know. And it doesn't need to be cruel. It can be a kind of curious conversation with an audience and a medium. And so um, I hope that for a new generation of filmmakers in America.
Fantastic. All right, guys, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. They're a beautiful film. Hopefully, just by seeing this, they are inspired to break some norms. So let's see.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Rick. Have a great
Thank
night.
you. Take care. Thank you all. Bye-bye.